My family member slipped, fell, and they hurt themselves seriously in a hospital. How do I know? How do they know if they have a valid claim, something that they should be maybe talking to a lawyer about and potentially filing a lawsuit? And to answer that question, I want to start by saying that the hospital slip and fall cases, some of these cases are the most valid claims. And there's some of the cases that cause us as attorneys to get the most pissed off because we expect a certain level of care from our hospitals and our hospital providers when they're dealing with patients. And so the best way to explain it is like this. The fundamentals of an injury claim, of a negligence claim, is that a business or a person owes a certain standard of care. They have to follow certain safety rules for the benefit of other people. And if this person or if the business has violated certain safety rules that they darn well should have known about, and because they violated those safety rules, somebody got hurt, then that person or business who violated the safety rules is responsible for making sure that they compensate and make whole the person who got hurt. And so let's take that concept and put it in a hospital setting, right? Hospitals, they're big business, right? And doctors, they make good money. And this is what they do all day, every day. And we know that a lot of the hospitals we see, they're actually owned by these big umbrella corporations that own a ton of hospitals, right? And they have certain knowledge because they've been in the business for a long time. And what they know is this, that they are having patients that are coming in, and a lot of their patients are physically incapacitated or in a bad situation. Maybe they have a dementia. Maybe there's an injury to a patient's lower body that makes it difficult for them to walk. Maybe there's something that's putting their balance off. Maybe they're frail and older. Whatever the case may be, they know that they have patients that come in, and these patients are not capable of taking care of themselves to maybe walk and get to the bathroom. And so hospitals know this. And so one of the first things that they're all supposed to do is they have a checklist. And their medical providers, their doctors, their nurses have a checklist. And they're supposed to look and evaluate and diagnose patients that might have some of these illnesses or disabilities or infirmities and put safety mechanisms in place to keep these patients from potentially going off into a bathroom or going for a walk when they shouldn't be, and where they could potentially hurt themselves. And if that's the case, and if they have a patient that they are supposed to recognize could potentially hurt themselves, then what they need to do is take certain safety precautions, such as putting a band on their arm that signals that the patient is a fall risk, or putting guards up and pulling the guards up on the bed, or making sure that there's an orderly assigned to help and facilitate and help the patient get to and from the bathroom or get to wherever they may need to go, and making sure that the patient has the ability to communicate with the nurse very easily from their bed so that they can get the help they need. And in situations where the medical provider hasn't done what they need to do, they haven't done this kind of safety check, and then the patient ends up getting hurt as a result, well, that's on the hospital. The hospital makes good money to make sure that they do this every time. And these are safety rules that the hospital has in place that the hospital needs to follow every time. And if the hospital hasn't followed these particular safety rules with a patient who is infirm and needs this additional heightened safety mechanisms in place, then the hospital is going to be liable, or should be liable, for injuries that happen because of the hospital's negligence. Another example that we see in hospitals is where a doctor maybe is giving different medicines that have reactions for a patient, and the doctor doesn't do what the doctor, same idea, the doctor doesn't notate on the file and doesn't do the safety check and doesn't put up the precautions in place to protect the patient who may be getting these medicines that they've never had before that can have them lose their balance and lose their ability to think coherently and move coherently. And so these cases we see, these often fall under the classification of a medical malpractice hospital slip and fall case. And so I mention that because there's certain rules and certain ways that you're going to approach those types of claims, because medical malpractice is a particular type of negligence claim that we see in Florida, at least, and we have our own rules in place with how those claims are handled. We also see in hospitals, way too much, we see what we call ordinary general negligence claims. And these are the sort of claims where the hospital is just not keeping the environment of the hospital where it needs to be, safe for both patients and for any potential guests. So, for example, people are walking in and out of a hospital all day, every day. The hospital has certain safety standards, again, in place that goes along with keeping the hospital safe, keeping the floorways safe, and otherwise providing the ability for the patients and for the patients' families to come and go as they need to, right? And so if a hospital hasn't, for example, kept the floor clean like they need to, and hospitals have policies in place for how they're supposed to do this. One hospital we looked at recently where we had a client who slipped and fell on something on the ground, that hospital has a policy in place that they need to clean, that their cleaning people who they pay good money to need to make sure that they keep the floors clean every 30 minutes, like clockwork. And in this particular case that we had, the hospital didn't do that. And because they didn't do that, something had hit the ground, a slippery substance, as like some sort of oily, slippery substance, and it was there for hours. And then our client ended up not expecting to see anything like that, ended up walking and ended up falling and hurting themselves very badly. That's an example of an ordinary negligence situation with the hospital because they didn't keep the walkway clean like they should have. We're also looking at things like what's the lighting light? There's certain lighting that they're supposed to keep in a certain way. You know, are there safety mechanisms around the toilet and that sort of thing. And so at its heart, when you're trying to evaluate whether or not there's a claim, look, call an attorney. If you're hurt or your family member's hurt, you just talk to an attorney about it and flesh it through. But before you do that, recognize that at its heart, it's all about what is the reasonable standard of care that we should expect from the hospital and from its employees and from the doctors that work there? What should we expect from the hospital, right? And we know that the hospitals deal with people that are patients and with bereaved family members all day, every day. And so they know that. And they have certain safety rules and procedures that they have to follow that they know about. And if a hospital has violated those safety rules and procedures, those safety rules and procedures that you expect, that I expect, that we all expect that they should put in place for their patients who are paying very, very good money to be there. And because the hospital or its workers or the doctors have violated those safety rules, that somebody got hurt, then there's probably a valid hospital slip and fall claim. Thanks.